All right, I'm what you need, and you guys are watching my channel. If you like what you're seeing, you can like, share, subscribe, and you can donate via PayPal. The link is both in the chat section as well as in the description of this stream. In fact, it's right here. So I'm gonna pop it up. And if you want to come on here, chop it up with me as a guest, you can also join the stream. That link is in the chat section. I'll see you pop up on guest, and then we will roll from there. All right. Cool. We're going to talk about the weekend fights. As you can see, we're talking about some live underdogs. Not only were they live underdogs, but they actually upset the clock. So we'll be talking about the following live underdogs today. We're talking about Liam Paro in his fight against Subriel Matias over the weekend, in which Liam Paro defeated Subriel Matias by unanimous decision. And we'll break down what really went on there. We'll also talk about Gustavo Puello, who faced Gary Antoine Russell Jr. and also got an upset win over Gary Antoine Russell. So we'll talk about that as well. As we'll also talk about David Benavidez and what was a much more difficult fight than he expected against Alexander Gvorzdyk. And we'll comment a little bit about that. The only fight that went kind of the way we expected it to, but there are several different reasons why that happened anyway, is we had Frank Martin versus Gervonta Tank Davis, also known as, I forgot his Islamic name, but he's also known as Tank. That fight kind of went the way how I thought it was going to go, but not exactly for the reasons that I thought it would go that way. So we're going to go into all of those fights. We're going to talk about these underdogs and how live they are. And even when we look at this entire year, we've had a lot of underdogs or guys I didn't expect to win fights, and they won fights. And so just in a quick synopsis, we're going to recap them a little bit. You guys can join in the chat and other areas. Now, if you hear any background noise here, understand I'm not inside of a studio. I'm inside of a home. So if you hear background noise from dogs or you hear some noise on the side here, neighbors are doing some construction on the roof. I'm sorry about that. You're going to have to forgive me, but the two sets of variables are here that can disturb the stream and really make it kind of noisy. You'll have to excuse me for that. I put it to you in advance. All right, so let's get into these live underdogs. And let me start off with one of the fights that I predicted that actually Matias would beat Paro. However, I was tempted to do a quick breakdown of why I thought Liam Paro would win this fight and why I didn't think Matias could knock him out. But I just didn't do it. But I kind of expected this because I didn't put up the breakdown stream that I was going to do of why I thought Liam Paro would beat Subriel Matias, seeing the weigh-in and having seen a number of things. But I just never got around to putting up that video, so I just didn't do it. But what I want to say to you guys is, to a lot of people, this is a huge upset because Subriel Matias was a 7-1 favorite to win. However, I want to go into why Liam Paro beat Subriel Matias. So you guys can always leave your comments in the chat section, as well as you don't forget you can donate to me via PayPal. But I want you guys, we're going to go into this in some detail, so you guys should be able to enjoy yourselves as I do the breakdown to this. But there's another fight that I think some people actually spoke about, that they thought that Puello would beat Gary Antoine Russell Jr. But I want to go into this fight, which is one of the sleeper fights that was on the card of Tank versus Frank Martin. And this was actually a sleeper fight. Unfortunately, I never went into the details of the fight. So, but I will go into the details of the fight in a bit. And of course, you guys saw the fight, so y'all know who won that fight. And we want to pay attention to this particular one. This particular fight actually was a sleeper that went under my radar because I wasn't interested in the Tank versus Frank Martin card. I missed this matchup, and this matchup. Gustavo Puello is actually a good fighter from South America. And Gary Antoine Russell, he was now going to be facing up with a fighter who had a lot of savviness, could box, So we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. We're going to explain what happened in that fight because that was a good fight. Gvorzdyk versus David Benavidez. Well, there's so much to take home from that fight, but we're going to go into that fight in more detail. I just wanted to just to speak a little bit about the fact that David Benavidez could not bully Alexander Gvorzdyk pretty much, and Gvorzdyk, still got some of his, game in there. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, and of course the last fight, which everybody wanted to talk about, but I don't really care too much for. Frank Martin versus Gervonta Tank Davis. Well, the first thing you need to know, guys, before you all go in, thinking that, this fight was on an even playing field, Frank Martin had a rehydration clause. And that's one. Two, I can see why Gervonta Tank Davis supports what's his name? Brian Garcia. I can get it now. I get why he's defending him so vehemently. Because Gervonta Tank Davis didn't take any VADA testing, and there was no VADA testing for this fight. There was no testing period for this fight. So that leaves a big question mark on Tank's win. Was he using PEDs? That's a question I want to know. And we're gonna get to that a little bit later on as we go along. But suffice it to say that two very important things. Frank Martin had a rehydration clause going into the fight, as well as Gervonta Tank Davis was not VADA tested, or no kind of PED testing from any independent anti-doping agency was involved in this fight. So those are two very important points that I wanted to stress before I go into this fight. I didn't predict that Tank would knock out Frank Martin, but I didn't expect that Tank would do this kinds of bullshit once again, like, the rehydration clause on Frank Martin. Even though Frank Martin was a big dude, he looked big and strong. I didn't expect that. And then the second thing is, we don't know if Tank was using PEDs. And I'm just going to put it out there right now, because the guy be knocking out everybody. But he also, I find, taking a punch way too easy. Like, Frank teed off with a really good straight right hand to Tank's head, and Tank just shook it off like it was nothing. And Frank wasn't boxing bad, per se. He wasn't really boxing bad. But it's just like Frank didn't seem like, with all the strength that Frank's a tough dude. He's a strong dude. With all his strength and everything, it didn't look like Frank was doing anything to Tank. And so I just want to know, because Tank didn't do VADA testing for this fight, and he boasted about it, that he didn't. And Frank started off doing VADA testing for this fight, and then he was being VADA tested, and Tank was not being VADA tested. I'm just saying right now, all of that, in my opinion, already, because I already thought that Tank had the experience and everything. Everybody's trying to hype up the fight and stuff, but I knew what it was. I knew Frank didn't have the experience. Frank did better than I expected. He protected his body a lot better. He did a lot of really good things so when I predicted this fight, it was off of Frank's previous fights where Frank wasn't protecting his body. I might as well do this before I go into any other fight right now, because this is the least exciting fight of all the fights I have to talk about anyway. So I might as well go through this. All right. So Gervonta Tank Davis versus Frank Martin. And get this out of the way, because I really wasn't interested in this fight, and I still am not. One, Frank Martin was going into this fight with a handicap that he could only hydrate so far. Two, Gervonta Tank Davis had not been VADA tested for this fight. So the way how I think about it is, Tank was walking down Frank all night because guess what? He knew that Frank was weight trained. Okay. Secondly, Tank was able to do that, and he didn't really have regard for Frank's power, because we don't know if Tank was also doing the same thing that Ryan Garcia did. He was cheating. So we don't know. Okay. Because there was no drug testing. Okay. So y'all can go on the Tank high train if y'all want to, just because it's Tank. But until I see a level playing field, until I see Tank get tested with his opponent, until I see Tank not giving no rehydration clause for his opponent, you ain't getting shit out of me for this fight. And by the way, Frank did pretty good given the situation. Now, let's go into a second thing. Yes, Frank wasn't using his jab enough, but he had a damn good jab. And that jab is what was keeping Tank honest on the outside. I'm not saying that Tank wasn't feinting and changing levels and trying to close the distance. But Frank was doing a great job with his jab. The problem with Frank was he wasn't committed to his jab. His best punch in the whole fight, I said this a long time, Frank Martin has a good jab. And his jab was what was keeping Tank honest. Now, Frank couldn't hurt Tank in this fight. Clearly, he couldn't. He was hitting him with really good shots, but wasn't doing nothing to Tank. But the point is, Frank had a really good jab. And that alone, based on what I saw in the fight between Liam Paro and Super Matias, that alone could have won him the fight. But he was not very consistent with his jab. He was not popping his jab. And I'm going to tell you why. Tank was countering his jab, right? Tank would counter. Even though he would land his jab, he would still get hit with a shot. So you found more and more as the fight progressed, Frank Martin was afraid to use a jab. But Frank started off, actually. He was the first guy to throw the first punch in the fight. So the thing with Frank was his jab. Now, I listened to other channels and were saying Frank don't have inside game. That's bullshit. Frank has inside game. The thing with Frank, though, was Frank was trying to conserve his energy. At the same time, he was trying to be defensive. And I think he got too defensive. And Tank repeatedly got him in the same corner all the time. And he was bit by bit closing the gap. And Frank did, I believe it was in round 6 or something, get Tank on the back foot, caught him with 2 good shots, put 2 good shots together, and got Tank on the back foot. And Frank was walking down Tank. But for the most part, Frank was the one on the bicycle. Now, Frank got caught spinning out. The problem with Frank was he tried to pop that check hook and then spin out, and Tank timed him. And so he caught him with like almost a left hook, kind of like what Canelo did to what's his name? Caleb Plant. You know, Caleb Plant dipped to his right and he got caught. Well, in this case, Frank was trying to spin out to his right. You know, he threw the check and he spun out to his right. And as he was spinning out to his right, Tank caught him with the left the left hook as he was spinning out. And that's what put Frank down. But honestly speaking, Frank was boxing okay. He was boxing all right. I mean, he don't got a whole lot of experience doing this, right? And the punches he was putting together were too straight. He had a lot of straight punches. He wasn't really mixing up his jab either. He was mostly jabbing to the head. He should have been jabbing more to Tank's body. He should have been digging more to Tank's body. But I understand. The reason he was jabbing up top is because he didn't want to get countered up top. He preferred Tank went to his body. And Tank really didn't do a whole lot of body work either. He was just throwing a lot of hard shots. And I believe it's because he knew that Frank was weight trained. And it's almost the same thing Ryan did to Devin Haney, except Devin Haney didn't go down. I mean, he didn't go down and stay down. Devin Haney fought all the way through the fight. Devin Haney was, what he was doing. The difference, Frank didn't have that championship experience. And so he didn't exactly know what to do in certain situations where tying up Tank would have made more sense. Buy himself some time, pivot him out, keep on boxing on the back foot, mixing it up, going low to high. You feint high, go low. I know Tank is quick. He has sharp reflexes, just like Frank. Frank has sharp reflexes too. But I think Frank didn't set up Tank to walk into traps enough. He was busy trying to get out of situation because Tank was pressing the action. He was pressing the action for about 8 rounds. Obviously, he was pressing the action, but Frank was doing a good job of maintaining range for a certain bit. But the problem with Frank was once Tank got him in a certain corner, he just went all defensive and he wasn't initiating with his jab. He wasn't doubling up his jab sometimes, keeping the jab, lingering the jab, changing the pace of the jab. He wasn't really doing that a lot. He has a really good jab. It's just he wasn't using it enough. I think if he used his jab a little bit more, we wouldn't be in this situation right now. He would have made it to the final bell. Tank might have still won the fight based on points on winning rounds, but he wouldn't have dropped Frank. So Frank gave Tank. He allowed Tank to be first on a number of occasions. Now, having said that, we expected Tank to beat Frank. Okay, to be honest with you, we expected Tank to beat Frank. And then given the handicap that Tank handicapped Frank, and then we don't even know if Tank was using what he was using because Frank was doing VADA testing. So Frank was going through the hurdles with VADA testing. Tank wasn't doing no VADA testing. Tank wasn't doing no VADA testing. So fucking Tank, again, he could have been using something else. You know, he could have been using stuff while Frank Martin is being tested. So he's not using stuff. You know what I mean? So all of these things I looked at and I said, okay, so he really trying to get the win. And then we're gonna just have these big question marks on your resume. Because I don't believe Tank. He won't straight up and down beat a guy. He won't take that risk. So everybody's giving him props for beating a dehydrated, weight drained Frank Martin. Okay, he don't impress me with that. He might impress y'all. He ain't impressing me with that. I'm sorry. Right? Frank had to rehydrate to a certain weight. Frank was doing VADA testing and Tank wasn't doing none. So fuck Tank. And y'all could go on your Tank heights as much as y'all want. But to me, he's a fraud still. He improved nothing with this fight. He should have fought Shakur Stevenson. He didn't fight Shakur Stevenson. He's a waste of fucking time in my book. So I just wanted to finish that off because y'all saw I didn't do no kind of I didn't talk about this fight. I didn't give this fight no shine because to me, this first of all, this was not a fair fight in terms of experience. I thought that Frank, yeah, he earned a shot to face Tank, but I thought Tank should face somebody better. And on top of that, Tank had to get advantages. He had to get a weight advantage. And on top of that, we don't know if he was using PEDs. So since he wasn't tested, I couldn't give a fuck. Okay. So forget Tank and Frank Martin. You know, hopefully Frank got some experience from this and becomes a better fighter for it. And that's about it. You know what I'm saying? I ain't got nothing else to say about that. Gvorzdyk versus David Benavidez. Now, this fight was interesting because David Benavidez has been extremely dominant at 168. Now, in terms of him facing Alexander Gvorzdyk, yeah, he won the fight. Okay, cool. But honestly speaking, he didn't look like no monster against Gvorzdyk. Clearly, Gvorzdyk was the bigger guy. Clearly, David Benavidez couldn't do anything to Gvorzdyk in terms of like beating him up. You know what I mean? He couldn't do that. And I thought this was very interesting because what it says is if David Benavidez just, you know, everybody was always on the hype train with David Benavidez. If he jumps up and he faces Artur Beterbiev, you know, he's the only guy that probably could give Beterbiev, you know, a win. He could beat Beterbiev. This was the hype around David Benavidez. Now we come to understand he can't even beat Dmitry Bivol at this point. Them guys way bigger than him. Way bigger than him. Bivol's a bigger dude than him. Beterbiev would knock his ass out. And Bivol would beat the shit out of him. All right. And I like David. I like David Benavidez. You know, David Benavidez's size is what helps him at 168. It's not so much that he's a big knockout artist. He's not. He's not really this tremendous puncher either. He's more accumulated puncher. And he got that stamina on the latter end. And you know what's the other interesting thing I noticed? He was getting tired. Ninja was getting tired against Gvorzdyk because a much bigger guy to beat on. You know what I mean? And to keep that kind of pace and work rate with. So this was a great learning experience for David Benavidez. I'm handed to him that way. But when all those things are equal and you ain't the weight bully in there, yo, it changes. Everything changes, man. You know. So, but it was interesting because what it showed was, okay, David can fight at 175. He can win some fights at 175. But he's going to have to acclimatize to 175. He's going to have to acclimatize. Otherwise, it's better he just stay at 168. You know, all this talk about David being the next great heavyweight champion and all of that, that has to be on pause, having his performance with Gvorzdyk now being complete. That's on pause. Okay? But it was nice that he went to this new weight division. He tested himself, and he actually came out victorious. Kudos to him on that. But with respect to him playing with those big boys right now, nah, he ain't ready for that. He ain't ready for that shit. You know, I'm just saying. Right? He can go back down to 168, you know, and do his thing at 168. You know what I mean? But at 175, them boys will finish him. They'll finish him. It might knock his ass out. You know what I'm saying? He ain't ready for those guys yet. Those guys are much bigger guys. And so that to me was very revealing. Shout out to you guys. Are you guys commenting in the comment section? Not so far. Remember, you can leave your comments in the comment section. If you want to jump on here as a guest as well, you can do so. Let's go into the other underdog that was pretty live. So Gvorzdyk actually turned out to be not a live underdog, but a durable underdog. You know, he was the underdog here. We expected David Benavidez to win. We just didn't expect him to have such a difficult time facing a guy like Gvorzdyk, who's not done, by the way. But I'm just saying, he had a difficult time with him because of the size of him. Okay, he didn't not even once he hurt Gvorzdyk. Not even once. All right, now this guy, the sleeper. We had Gustavo Puello versus Gary Antoine Russell Jr. And I gotta say, y'all, this was a good fight. All right. Gary Russell Jr. was throwing a lot of combinations, but most of them were blocked. The effective puncher in this fight was Gustavo Puello, who is long and rangy, so Gary Antoine Russell had to close the distance to get to him. He kept on getting hit with the right check hook all night long. Gustavo Puello also landed some beautiful counter shots to what Russell Jr. was doing. And Russell was just throwing a lot of straight shots straight down the center, getting blocked. He would try to throw hooks, but they would be caught. Gustavo Puello outboxed Gary Russell Jr. It was a beautiful, clean fight. You know, Gary Antoine Russell is a good fighter and everything. He has skills and all of that, but I don't think that, like, he thought he could just swamp, you know, Gustavo Puello and get him out of there, and it just backfired royally on him. And, you know, Gustavo Puello, you know, pivoting this way, pivoting that way. He'd be circling the ring one way, change direction on him. You know, had Gary Antoine Russell, you know, following him at times and countering him at will, both southpaws, of course. Puello being the older fighter, 39 years old. Puello was supposed to, of course, fight for the 140-pound championship, the WBC title. I believe it was against Jose Ramirez back in I don't know if it was 2020 or what it was. He was supposed to face Regis Prograis. He never faced Regis Prograis. So, you know, he had opportunities. He just never got his championship shot. Now he's going to have his championship shot. He'd probably be facing the winner of Devin Haney and Sandor Martin. Devin Haney has Sandor Martin to face, and these guys are dangerous guys. Let me just say, Puello, who doesn't have no big name reputation, he's showing that he's a classy dude, levels above Gary Antoine Russell. We have Sandor Martin in the mix. We have the kid that beat Josh Taylor. I forgot what his name is right now. Jack Catterall. He's another troublesome one. You know, we got some really good fighters in the division that don't got no big name. Liam Paro is another one of them that we got to talk about. Paro faced Subriel Matias, and man, Liam Paro did Australia proud. Outbox him. Now, it wasn't like he wasn't fighting. He was fighting them in spots, but he knew how to keep range. Again, Liam Paro wasn't fighting Subriel Matias on the inside. He was keeping him at range, keeping him on the outside for most of the time. Whenever he came, he collapsed on the inside. He knew how to clinch up against Subriel Matias, turn him. He was even backing up Subriel Matias at a certain point in the fight. In the late rounds of the fight, Subriel Matias was gassed. Liam Paro was just going at it and finished the show in style. In the 12th round, Liam Paro really piled it on. Subriel Matias at a certain point in the middle of the fight, he seemed to be getting momentum, and he was catching Liam Paro with one or two shots. But Paro, again, his defense pretty sound, cover up himself, pivot out the way, use his jab, use his left hand. I actually saw Paro not just pouring with his jab, but actually pumping a really good jab. And he was mixing it up, head, body. He gets some body shots in there. Subriel Matias couldn't get his rhythm going. He couldn't really get to throw the combinations he wanted to because Paro wasn't directly in front of him for most of the fight. Paro did stand his ground at certain points in the fight. He did push Subriel Matias back at certain points in the fight. It wasn't the cleanest fight in the world in terms of Paro was getting hit too by Subriel Matias. But Paro showed his dog. He showed his grit. He also showed his intelligence. He didn't stay too long in front of Subriel Matias. He would pivot away. And he would catch Subriel Matias with shots coming off of angles because he'd be pivoting out the way, you know. So there was a lot of good things that Liam Paro was doing in there, and he deserved the win in Subriel Matias' backyard in Puerto Rico with the crowd against him. Liam Paro showing a Devin Haney performance, kind of like performance, workman-like performance, stick to the game plan. tough as nails as well. And it's because he did get hit with some good, clean shots. And, you know, he was able to stick to his game plan regardless. He wasn't just going to go in a firefight with Super Matias. And he outboxed him. I mean, Super Matias could not get, he really couldn't get no momentum really going in the whole entire fight. He couldn't catch up to Liam, even though Liam was, Liam wasn't running around the ring or anything, but it was just he couldn't catch up to Liam. You know, he could get him in the corner. Liam would come out the corner, pivot out the corner, or he would slip under certain shots and lock him up. So, Liam's not the best boxer I've ever seen. He's a little scrappy. He gets hit. But what I like about Liam is he implemented a game plan, and that game plan was what beat Super Matias. And he beat him clearly, like comprehensively clearly. The judges gave him the decision. It was a beautiful performance, just like Puello versus Russell Jr. It was a beautiful performance. In fact, if you look at Puello versus Russell Jr., you're going to have to excuse the dogs in the background. These are like pups that just came to my neighbor's home, and they're just very loud, and they make a lot of noise, and over nothing. Maybe just something they see and they just bark. Okay, it's about 7 or 8 of them. So you're going to get that disturbance in the background. Like I said, this is not a studio. I'm in my home, and it just so happens you can get background noise, and that's what you're hearing in the background. But having said that, yeah, Paro did a great job, as Puello did a great job. Both of them are not really well-known fighters. Paro has proven, because he beat Montana Love, this is the second big win. And now Liam Paro is the IBF world champion. So shout out to Liam Paro. That is actually a tougher fight for Devin Haney than Subriel Matias would have been. And so, we've had these underdogs who were live, and 2 underdogs who were live, betting underdogs, that is, have come up trumps. It's Liam Paro, who beat Subriel Matias, and Gustavo Puello, who beat Gary Anton Russell Jr. They were considered underdogs. Those are the guys who considered the guys who were going to win. And they showed that quality. They showed their class. They showed what level they're at. They are a level above the other guy. Gvorzdyk made the fight with Benavidez pretty interesting in that he was withstanding Benavidez's punishment. So we weren't sure what was going to actually happen, because, Benavidez kind of had to box at a certain point in time. He was the one on the back foot. Gvorzdyk was the one pursuing him. So it was very interesting to watch. I think Benavidez has to do more boxing at the higher weight classes, because until he can get that mass on him and that size on him, he's really going to have a lot of problems with those bigger guys. He couldn't just railroad Gvorzdyk, which is what some people expected to happen, but that didn't happen. So those are the weekend fights. Let's recap a couple of surprise upsets during the year. So people predicted that Tyson Fury would beat Alexander Usyk. I thought Usyk would win. Usyk beat Tyson Fury, who was considered the number 1 heavyweight in the world. That was an upset number 1. We had also from Australia as well, Costa Tszú's son, Tim Tszú, being upsetted by Sebastian Fundora. So that was an upset as well. We have this upset, which probably won't be maintained. I believe it will become a no contest. But nonetheless, Devin Haney was upsetted by Ryan Garcia, even though I think that will be returned. That will be overturned. I think that's an interesting fight as well. And then we have several upsets actually this year. We had the highly touted Deontay Wilder being knocked out cold by Zhilei Zhang and being beaten by also Joseph Parker, and retiring from the sport of boxing as a result of that. So we've had several big upsets this year already, showing you that the world of boxing is unpredictable. And I really enjoy that. I enjoy seeing the fighters mix it up. I enjoy seeing the fighters, unexpected people win. It makes the sport more enjoyable. It makes the sport more exciting. In fact, if we don't forget, I believe it was this year that Shakur Stevenson actually faced the Aces. Was that this year? I think that was probably last year. But that was also an exciting fight in which Shakur Stevenson could have lost. So I'm just saying, we're seeing more competitive fights between guys who. Oh, Jack Catterall also beat Josh Taylor, by the way. That's another upset. That we kind of expected that to happen, but nonetheless, it's an upset you have to talk about. So, and we are, who else we got? Yeah, I think that's about it. Um, but having said that, I wanted to say that, if they keep this up, if they keep on matching the best with the best, somebody's got to lose. You know what I mean? And that's the fun part of boxing, in my opinion. Um, seeing seeing fighters fight, man. Seeing fighters fight at the highest level. Uh, so that's all I got for the weekend fights. It's 30 minutes in. I'm what you need. You've been watching my channel. If you like what you've seen, don't forget you can like, share, subscribe. Don't forget you can also donate via PayPal. The link is not only in the chat section, which you see right there, but it's also in the description. I'm gonna catch you guys later. I'm what you need. If anybody else wants to jump on here, chop it up with me really quickly, you can join here as a guest. I'm gonna give you about two. I'm gonna give you less than that. I'm gonna give you a minute to come on here and say something. Otherwise, we are out of here, and we wish you all a blessed day. I'm what you need. You've been watching my channel. If you like what you're seeing, don't forget you can like, share, subscribe. You can donate via PayPal. I'm gonna catch you guys later. Peace.